Hello, and welcome to all of you beautiful souls tuning in today to the Heart of the Soul podcast. Earthly Nova on YouTube. My name is Amana, and I am so happy that you're here. This is a space where we remember what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth, navigating the ebbs and flows of change, honoring each other's differences, and connecting about that which unites us. Together, we practice using our voices in the ancient ritual of storytelling, sharing our stories of birth, life, and death, and celebrating how we and they change across time. I hope that soaking in these stories will leave you feeling inspired, connected, and more alive in your own beautiful body and unique life.
Do you want us to be at an angle like that? Ooh. Hey, babe. Hi. Hi, everybody. We're on.
Well, it doesn't mean this part is going to be in the video that gets published.
But it still can be, because it can show a little bit of the rawness of how we do things around here.
All right, so
Cheers.
today is Saturday, November 4th. Is that right? Today's Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah. Saturday, November 4th, 2023. My name is Amana. I'm here with my husband, Owyn. We have been together for a little over 9 years now. Married for 9 years. Met a few months before that. And you have, if you've followed along, you've heard an earlier episode where I tell my side of the story of the time of my life before I met Owyn and our meeting. And at some point, we'll probably record a joint episode where we get to tell both sides and how that all plays out. And we have had 6 pregnancies, and we have 2 living children, a little boy who's 6 and a daughter who is 3. And yeah, I thought it would be just nice to record another episode with Owyn. I haven't done one since the intuitive toileting episode. I'll try to include links in the show notes. So today we're going to talk about our first 2 experiences with pregnancy and birth. And yeah, I feel like maybe we could just say that when we first met 9 years ago, some of the first questions we asked each other was,
Can I turn a little bit more to face you if we're having a conversation between us?
Yeah.
All right, cool. That's easier. There we go.
You remember I
absolutely remember that first conversation. It's kind of part of what she was talking about, our meeting story. Yeah.
Little bits will probably sprinkle in here. But yeah, what do you remember those first questions we asked each other?
Well, I remember that it was when we first went to Judith Brownhawk's tent together. Yes. And sat down in front of Noah, a girl who I had already dated, so it was a little weird for me, and her boyfriend. And you sat down with me in such a way that it felt like you had already been my girlfriend for enough time for us to feel physically comfortable with each other. And then, yeah. I don't remember which one of us asked first, but I feel like it was me who asked you, how old are you? And you said, I'm 32. And I was like, yeah. And you looked at me and you said, well, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm 35. And you were like, yeah. She's like, I thought you looked young, but I was like, but you said something about a couple of the gray hairs that you could see in my beard.
You said you could see a little, like my
tiny little crow's feet starting. Yep, because your hair was like, you didn't have dreads at the time, so your hair was all nicely. Well, I mean, it was semi-disheveled because we were at a music festival, but you were still well kept, and you looked good.
It was like the initial first few questions. We were like, "Are you married?" or something like that.
Yeah, are you married?
Yeah, how old are you?
How old are you? How old are you? Do you want to have? And do you have children? No. Do you want children? Yes. And then we kissed.
Yep.
Yeah. And that was it. And we've been basically inseparable. I mean, she lived about 100 miles away from me at the time, and I'd get up, or I'd do work, and then I'd leave work and I'd drive over to see her, drive the 3 hours that it took to go see you, spend the night with her, and then drive home in the morning to get back to work by 9 o'clock. And we did that for a couple of weeks before I was like, I can't do this anymore. Will you marry me? And come live over here with me. And you took me up on it, and here we are.
Yes.
So
and then we knew we were getting married, and and it's so funny because it's so long ago, and I always think, oh, I won't ever forget these details, but I'm sure there's things I'm going to say I'm going to say wrong or whatever. But I remember we were open before we got married to potentially conceiving. Is that right? Or was it after? It didn't happen before we got married.
I believe that we were both open to it, but we were not actively trying to get pregnant. I do remember the moment, though, where you communicated with me that you actively wanted to start trying to have a baby, because I was doing the pull and pray. Right? So so I was trying not to have a kid.
Yes.
For the first couple of months of us being together. And I think that it was the day after our wedding, when we were in the tent together and we were having sex. I was about to come, and you gave me this look of like, yes, do it inside of me, basically, like let's try to have a baby. I mean, I kind of like non-verbally communicated with you, like, do you want to do, because we had talked about it.
What about when we went down to the river? Remember when we went down to the riverbank at night and put blankets out? Like, I remember that being like the first time that we knew it might happen.
I'm vaguely, and you were sitting on me. Like, we were sitting up.
I remember the position.
I'm only vaguely remember that. I clearly forget some details too.
That being the first time that we were consciously open to the possibility of babies. And then maybe after the wedding, like I had already like not conceived that cycle. And then
maybe that was the one. I feel like maybe that's when we conceived, is the one I'm talking about in the tent.
Maybe.
Because I mean, I definitely had that moment of like, let's do this. Kind of like I had the feeling, I had the thought in my head, like, let's have a baby. And I looked at you that way. I didn't actually say, can we have a baby now? But then you look back at me, you might have just been thinking I was giving you sexy eyes or something, and you were giving them back. But whatever, in my brain, you agreed. So and then right, and then we found out you were pregnant a little while after that.
I don't have the dates or remember. It was sometime in early October, I guess, is when we found out that we were pregnant. That I was pregnant. We aren't pregnant. I am pregnant.
Yeah, I don't remember when we went on our honeymoon. All I did was
something. I feel like it was in October
when we went on our honeymoon.
Yeah.
How many weeks were you in before the miscarriage started?
Well, I was what they call 6 weeks pregnant, but it would have really been like 3 weeks since conception, because they count pregnancy from the first day of your last menstrual period, and you can't actually get pregnant until 2 weeks after that is when you ovulate.
Okay, so you were 3 to 5 weeks pregnant-ish when we went on our honeymoon.
Yes. Well, but I wasn't. So like,
no, you discovered like right before
the day before. So yes, we get pregnant, totally excited. Of course I knew that miscarriages happened, but all of my
just got married, just got pregnant, about to go on our honeymoon to Hawaii. Everything is so great.
But like none of my close friends had ever had a miscarriage. I remember my old neighbor had one.
Yeah, we talked about this. Yeah.
But just got married. I was pregnant. We were about to go on our honeymoon. It was so exciting. It was like the day before we left on the plane to go to Hawaii that I started bleeding. And I was like, and I was heartbroken.
And I was as compassionate as I could be, but I didn't even come close to understanding what you were going through emotionally, really emotionally, what you were going through. And because I also don't necessarily have the same sort of emotional reaction to things. I am an emotional person.
Yes.
You know that now. But usually my emotions come out in an angry way rather than in a sorrowful way.
Yeah, and just, for me, I had been that person who knew I wanted to be a mom since I was a little kid. I was like, had waited for the man.
Right. And like you said, all your friends, their first pregnancy resulted in a live, healthy baby.
Yes.
And you're like, why me? Why is this happening to me?
Right now, and just like, yeah.
And I wouldn't say that it ruined our trip to Hawaii, but it certainly changed the dynamic of the trip to Hawaii.
Yes.
I'm really glad that that's the trip that we got that Airbnb for, because we happened to get the place where we were staying was super cool. And so I didn't feel so bad about not getting to go out and explore as much as we would have had we been all in a happy state of mind,
Yes. But I was there feeling kind of inward. I was bleeding actively. Obviously,
there was some pain involved.
From what I remember, it was more emotional pain. The bleed wasn't that dissimilar to like a normal bleed where there hadn't been conception.
Because she was still just a little bean in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but for me, that was just, and of course, we hadn't known each other that long. Right. It was the first like conflict and grief and just, dealing with, or you navigating, supporting me through
a loss.
And, a loss that, you could understand to whatever you could, but like I was also the one going through it. And I was the one who, yes, you'd wanted kids for a long time, but I wasn't. Anyway, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but
emotionally, you handle things differently than I do. Yeah, because another woman wouldn't have given a shit. There are women out there who can do that, what you went through, and it's just not even emotional for them. I think my mom was one of them.
Yes, it's true. There are women like that. And for me, in other losses that were at the same time were emotional, yes, but not quite the same as this first experience. That it was like, oh, this like first pregnancy, this is what happens.
Yeah, and I guarantee that if that had not been that was my first experience with going through a pregnancy with a woman whom I was in a relationship with. Mm-hmm. Like I never had gotten anybody pregnant before, never handled the emotions involved in losing said pregnancy.
Right.
And so now if we were to go through that same thing again, I feel like I would be better in some ways, maybe even worse in some ways. Who knows?
Really?
I'd probably be better. I'd be better at just being compassionate, regardless of what it was that you were feeling about. I would be better because I'd know you better now. Yeah. Like I didn't know you so well then. I didn't know like how to. And I was usually shied away from like really emotional things like that, unless I was watching a movie and it was making me feel those emotions.
Yes.
But
so we still, enjoyed our honeymoon to the best of our ability, honored that little soul that came and went. And
you did a good job of honoring that little soul who came and went. And I just kind of was following.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So then, that was in, I think, October. I want to say October. But anyway.
Yeah.
And then I had already moved to Spokane at that point, I think.
Yeah, you moved in with me like about a month after we met, and then the next month we got married. Or we met in June and we got married at the end of September, and then we went on our honeymoon like at the end of October. Yeah, that sounds about right.
So then I was like I was more like hyper aware of like wanting the next pregnancy to quote unquote stick, or for that next soul to stay. So then I was, of course, wanting to get pregnant again. right away. We didn't get pregnant in the next cycle. I think it was like near New Year's Eve that
It wasn't
year.
too far away.
It wasn't too far away. We wound up, creating that little like altar, the baby altar.
You needed to do a kickstart a few times.
The big, like the altar, calling in the soul babies that we felt were there. I felt.
And this is the kind of thing. These are the kind of things that I don't remember because it's just not something that's inside of my wheelhouse.
Sure, you participated in it.
I'm not saying I didn't. I'm just saying I don't remember participating in it.
Yeah. You have talked about, remember the like love water from the ceremony you did, and we like made love with the water between us.
Was that part of what you're talking about?
Yeah, it was. That love water was also like on this little altar that we had.
Because that love water was wrapped up in my proposal to you.
Yes.
Yes, right. The second proposal. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah. And then we did conceive again. And of course, then me, like in my mind to universe, I'm like, please, like, let this baby please stay, like, please live.
And she did.
I was super nauseous, puking, unpleasant pregnant person.
Well, we didn't understand at the time, I think, that you were in at a level of pain. You were experiencing pain that was higher than what you should have been experiencing. I don't think that we knew because we were trying to do it very naturally.
Right.
We were trying not to do like ultrasounds and stuff like that.
We did an ultrasound. I chose a private practice.
And we didn't do any of that kind of stuff until you finally felt like you were sick enough that you needed to go to the hospital.
I'll tell that part.
Whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so we're pregnant. I'm puking all the time. It was very, hard. I mean, I was just a more grumpy person when I was also puking all the time. The fatigue in that early pregnancy.
That's what have anybody been.
Sure. And I had chosen not to have an ultrasound because I know the harms and dangers of ultrasound.
And that there's not really any discernible benefit to doing them.
Yes.
All stuff that I learned, by the way, through this lady right here, because I was very much following Amana's lead and probably would have followed anybody's lead who if she hadn't wanted to do things the way she did want to do things, I would have just followed that lead.
The woman's lead.
Absolutely. It was your body. It was, we were doing things the way I just got lucky that she's the one who I was following, because it turns out that the way that she wanted to do things really felt very good to me too in the end overall. Now that I'm sitting here having this conversation in front of all of you lovely people. But yeah, anyways.
And when we met, I had already been attending births with private practice midwives, home birth and birth center birth for a number of years. So I was very like in the birth world, and also knew that I didn't want practice of midwives, because then you don't know which midwife is going to be at your birth. I chose a woman named Tammy. I have
Tammy Roloff,
an episode with her that's already published, and we just recorded another one that I'll publish.
Oh, did you get to see Tammy when you were up in Spokane?
And we recorded a podcast together.
She's a lovely lady.
Yes. And so in this pregnancy, I'd had the puking, whatever, but then I started having this like right-sided pain. And I thought maybe I'd heard about like round ligament pain and, certain pains that you can have in pregnancy that can be normal. So I just kept writing it off.
I was massaging it for a little while. I remember it. And it hurt when I would massage it, and it didn't ever help. Yeah. I don't know how long it was before you finally decided.
This pain.
Yeah. And
it was continuing. I remember I wound up, it was like keeping me up at night. And so of course I'm not normally a person who takes Tylenol and Advil regularly. And so, but in pregnancy, I especially didn't want to take those. And so I wasn't taking anything either. I was experiencing the pain. I remember getting up at night, like sleeping out on the couch, so I wasn't waking you up. This is when we only had one bed. Now
now we're back to one bed.
We have two beds in the same room right next to each other in the old house. Now we're in the tiny house. But then I started having bloody urine. And for me, that was the thing that made me feel like
I don't remember the year.
I wanted to, I like then contacted my midwife and I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure. Like this, this isn't normal, right? Like, and I had also in this pregnancy spoken to this little womb lead and said, if you need an ultrasound, let me know, whatever that meant. I don't know, but that is something that I did like repeat to this baby. So I wound up in the ER seeking medical care, trying to understand why I had bloody urine.
Yeah.
And I was continuing to have this pain. They wound up doing an ultrasound and said, you have a completely blocked right ureter. And the right ureter is a tube between your kidney and your bladder.
Right. Kidney stones.
It was a globular blockage, not just a stone. There were multiple stones. But
right. It built up to the point where you had 100% blockage
on that right side. And they were like, are you sure you don't want painkillers? Like
I can't believe you're even walking around. They said that multiple times. Like, you haven't gotten painkillers. I can't believe you're even moving around in this state.
You want some? Like most
you're
people,
like, I just
it hurts.
Whatever, I'm just going through life. It's just something I'm having to experience.
Yes. So then they're like, based on my labs and things, they sounded scary. They made claims like, if you continue to let this be, you could go entirely septic, which is like where you're full body, and it would also like harm the baby.
Yeah.
Right. So it was hard to navigate that in pregnancy. And so they offered that I could have a stent placed. Actually, I'm going to do a whole other episode just on this whole experience. On the
stent. Yeah.
On the stent.
The medical practice of how they did it.
Malpractice.
Yeah.
And the lying and deceit.
Yeah.
Or they're like, so we can insert this stent, or we can put a tube like in your back, so your urine would drain out your back into a bag.
Oh, rather than getting rid of the blockage, we'll just make it to where you can bypass the blockage, basically, is what they could have done. But you opted not to do that one.
Not exactly. It would still both would be like temporary things.
Right.
It wouldn't be like I would pee out my back the whole
my whole life. It would have just been through your pregnancy, and then they would have addressed it after your pregnancy.
You keep speaking and
I just don't know. I don't know.
Then just wait for me to say, since I do know.
Okay.
About this particular stuff.
Okay.
So then I did have the procedure. I decided to, and normally you would go under general anesthesia for the stent placement. But after consulting with a couple of my midwife friends, I decided to have like a spinal block instead, where I was awake during the procedure. They placed the stent and whatever. So after that, they were wanting to ultrasound the baby. And they were like, you haven't had an ultrasound, and like, who is this midwife? And like being very judgy about having midwifery care and not having had an ultrasound because it's not their norm.
I have a different memory of that situation, of what led up to them doing an ultrasound of Hartley. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just have a.
Well, you also weren't with me the whole time. Like they actually did, like the one woman did a short ultrasound in the room before we did the big ultrasound.
Which was what prompted.
But before that, they were asking me to do it already.
Oh, so you're even getting okay. So you're talking about before they even did the small ultrasound.
Yes.
Okay. And I must not have been around when they were talking smack about our midwife and stuff.
No.
Because I feel like my hackles would have definitely gotten raised, and I probably would have felt a certain kind of negative way about the way they were speaking to me in those situations. I'm not good. I'll fight them too.
So then in the room they did like a short ultrasound with like a portable ultrasound machine.
I remember that.
And that's when like that OBGYN said like there's not a lot of amniotic fluid. And that is like,
she was very,
but still vague. Like they didn't.
Yeah, she sort of danced around. She said there was low amniotic fluid, and then when we Yeah, ultimately we found out there was.
Let's not skip ahead.
Okay.
So then she says there's low amniotic fluids, and I'm like, I talked to my midwife again. Of course, that can mean any number of things. Sometimes that's something that they might say to try to coerce you into something else. In this instance, I mean, they were saying and trying to coerce me into another ultrasound or convince me to have a second ultrasound.
In my perspective, I actually had a moment out of the room with you where I was at the desk with the same lady.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I was trying to be coerced into convincing you to do anything particular. When she spoke to me, it was the weirdest sensation because she was trying to be very gentle, but at the same time, I could tell that she was very worried about something, which freaked me the hell out because it's like this. It didn't feel like she's trying to get us to do something we don't want to do. It felt more like, oh, we don't want to do this thing, but it might be a good idea for us to. This is how my brain, before I went back into the room with you, you know, I don't remember if I asked her questions.
To me either, or it didn't feel like that to me, but I respect that is how it felt to you.
Yes, when I had an opportunity to, I don't know if I asked her questions or if I went out to get more clarification or something.
So then we're back in the room. I spend the night in the hospital. I'm asking to go home. They're like, no, you can't go home. You have to stay another night. And I'm like, no, I don't want to stay another night.
Right.
And
I remember that.
And, you know, like to begin with, like when I do this episode just about the whole thing, I'll go into all the details of how like the OBGYN said that couldn't happen. And then she talked to the surgeon and it could happen, like the spinal. Like there's all these people will say no. And
they don't even really know.
Yeah. They don't even really know. They're just trying to, So then I fought for discharge. We get discharged, but they're like, but please come back for this ultrasound tomorrow. Like we made you an appointment for this ultrasound.
Yes.
And I left the hospital knowing we could choose to like blow it off or choose to go the next day.
Yes, I remember all of that.
But we did go home. I was able to go home that night. Went home. Spent the night.
Talked about it for
talked about it.
Yeah.
Like,
what do you, and you asked me a lot, like, what do you think I should do? And
I didn't know.
I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I'm following your lead. Like, I thought we should do it. I mean, I was under the impression, because like I said, that moment that I had with the OBGYN, it didn't feel like she was trying. It felt like she was trying to be gentle with me. It felt like she was trying not to scare me too much.
To piss you off. You're a big guy. You can intimidate a lot of people, and they try to be gentle with you because they also are afraid of you.
They don't want to be intimidated by me. Well, whatever the reason was, it made me feel like when we were talking about it that night, it made when Amana was asking me, when you were asking me, it made me feel like, well, I think we should check.
So now we have this stent in place, which I asked if it was like a cardiac stent, which are things that are about this big and like the size of like one of those itty bitty tiny paws. And the doctor said yes. Turns out it was a big, like, horrible thing that was this long and thick and unpleasant. Urology has a lot less money.
Didn't have a big ball at the end.
It was coiled on each end so that it would stay in place. He spun it. So urology, a lot less money than cardiology. Anyway, very unpleasant thing. Was really painful throughout the whole pregnancy. But we go. I had also was like, okay, well, I have been telling this baby that like if they need an ultrasound, let me know. So maybe this is the way that they are letting me know.
Yeah.
So we decide to go in for the ultrasound. I've never had an ultrasound before. I've never been to an ultrasound before with another person.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to expect.
Same.
We go in, the lady's doing the ultrasound, says pretty much nothing the entire time.
Not just says nothing, but wouldn't answer our questions. Because we had lots of questions for her. We didn't stop asking questions.
I don't remember that part.
We had it bothered the crap out of me that she wouldn't answer my questions. And she just wouldn't do it. wasn't legally, she probably wasn't quite allowed to.
No, they're not allowed to answer.
So all she was there to do was to literally do the mechanical action of doing the ultrasound, and I couldn't accept it, and it was aggravating me so much.
Yeah. And then she left the room, and a physician came back in. You know, we're expecting them just to tell us everything's fine.
They actually took us into a different room to wait. We left the ultrasound room and went into a different space.
No.
We didn't?
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
at least not from my remembering. In my remembering, we're in the same room, and I've gone, because I work in that hospital too, I went back to that same room other times.
Oh.
And also anyway. So
the guy comes in.
So the guy comes in, and then he tells us that your baby has no kidneys.
Well, he said Potters first. He told us Potters, and both of us were like, well, what's Potters? And then he started to explain what you're about to say. Yeah.
He said that our baby has no kidneys, and without kidneys, they don't have amniotic fluid, which means that their lungs don't develop. So our baby had very underdeveloped lungs and an enlarged heart.
Yep. And possibly some other developmental issues. Yeah.
And would not survive outside of the womb.
And that last part that she said, it didn't.
I remember having to ask it again.
Yeah, it didn't register in my brain, because I'm up until that point, I always considered myself like a supremely optimistic person, right? And I had this crazy ego that all of my babies were going to be perfect. So when the guy said what he said, do you remember what my reaction was? Do you remember what I asked him?
Not exactly, no.
I said, okay, so, what do we do next? What's the next steps? Do you remember what his response to me was?
No.
His response was, the first thing he said was, well, you can call hospice. And in the moment he said that to me, it
made you understand.
It made me understand that there was no thing that we could do for this baby to survive.
Yes.
And oh God, talk about it.
In that same conversation that they offer that we could, I could send you up to labor and delivery right now, and we can induce labor.
And they called it like a DNC, or
it would not be a DNC at this phase. I was 6 months pregnant. This baby was moving inside of me. I could feel this baby moving inside of me.
Yes, 6 months. Yeah, you had a baby belly. Yeah.
That we could induce labor and make labor. They could give me drugs to force labor to happen and force this baby to be born now.
And just terminate the pregnancy. Yeah.
Kill the baby. Let's call it like it is.
Kill the baby.
And it was so much information. I didn't want to break down in the office. I said, can we go now? I guess Tammy said later, when she talked to him, he was concerned about me because I showed little emotion in the room.
Right.
And I just wanted to leave the hospital. And so
both of us were very much feeling that way. Go ahead, sorry.
So I said, let's, can we leave? And he was like, yes. And so we get up and leave the room. I remember you had to go get the car. I sat in a wheelchair. I was in quite a bit of pain at that time.
Yeah.
But I remember going out, and the ultrasound tech was at the front desk, and it was obvious she had told all the people there, and they watched us come out of the room. You could see it in their eyes that they knew.
Sad face thing.
That they knew, and I was just fuck you. I was pissed that of that interaction. It was not nice.
Right.
And yeah, I'll say more about that in another episode. But so then we go home and we're just devastated.
I can feel that you're holding your emotions in a little bit right now. That was one of the really hard moments of this
our lives together.
Well, of this particular story that we're telling, especially because this isn't the end of it.
No.
Right? So
I'm 6 months pregnant. We go home.
Right. So it's already been a challenging pregnancy up to this point.
Yes.
You've just had your own personal physical trauma with the stint and the fact. Well, I can't say just because you've been dealing with this pain for X amount of time now. And then we get this incredibly emotional punch to the gut. And both of us, I wanted to get the fuck out of there too.
Yeah. So I remember we got home.
Yeah,
I remember damn. I was wailing and crying, making sounds I've never made before, will probably never make again.
I hope that we don't ever have another reason. Yeah.
To make sounds like that again.
Jesus Christ.
Was just like so angry at universe, angry at my own body, angry and mad. And
yes. I don't even remember the car ride home.
I don't either. I remember little bits about being home, and I rember I said something nasty to you,
which made me and
you went out to the backyard.
Yeah. So we both were wanting to be emotional, and I think in that moment it was one of those moments where you kind of I had to, because she was lashing out at whatever she could lash out, whoever she could lash out at, and I was standing there. And so she said some nasty things to me that made me feel like she was blaming me for what's going on with Hartley. Like if you had eaten right, or some crazy shit like that.
Yeah.
Which, at the time, I mean, I can look back now and I feel okay about it. But in the time, it was one of those moments for me where it was like, I don't know if I can handle, because I wanted to be crying and I wanted to be lashing out and doing all the same shit. So I took a moment, I went out back, walked around for 5 or 10 minutes in the back, just breathing and steeling myself to go back in and sit with her and allow her to use me as a whipping post. And so, oh man. It's one of the harder things that I've ever done emotionally for myself. Because as you can see, I am also an emotional person. And so I turned off my tears and I prepared myself to allow this to happen. And I went back up, and we had a little nook that was kind of above our entryway that you could go, that was sort of a cute little hiding place. And she was sitting up there. When I left her, she was sitting up there, and when I came back in, she was still sitting up there trying to figure this stuff out on her own. And so I think I went and I came in, and there might have been a couple more nasty things that came out of your mouth, but then I just came up there and sat with you and held you. And then you just cried. I don't really remember much past that. But what was weird about that is that up until Hartley was born, I mean, I'm jumping way ahead, but I'm talking about my own personal emotions about this. I felt like when I drew the steel curtains, the emotional curtains, they stayed closed. They stayed closed all the way up until the moment. I don't want to talk about it right now because it's jumping ahead in the timeline. But I'll let you know the next time that I let my emotions go, and there's that's kind of the end part of this story.
Yeah. So where we go from there was that night we
decided not to kill the baby.
Yes, I was
there's no way.
For me, there's just no way. For me, I knew I wanted to wait for this little being. We didn't know who they were to come in their own time, and I was just gonna cherish the time that we did have.
And we did cool stuff
yes. But first, that night, it was that first night we went downstairs, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm smoking a bunch of weed because this baby's not going to live. That doesn't matter anymore.
Right? Doesn't freak you out.
Take the painkiller that they gave me.
Yep. Have a glass of wine.
Maybe. And we named her that night. We didn't know if it was a boy or a girl.
Yeah.
But even that night, we're waiting. We were waiting to name her until she was its baby, till they were born, and then well, since
that's not going to happen. Yeah.
Then let's name them now. Then we did. We chose the name Hartley that could go either way for us, as a boy or a girl.
And I remember that of all of the names, that one came to us quite easily. Yeah.
And it was agreed upon just like swiftly. Whereas none of our other children have had Evie naming.
So. Which is good for them because it means we actually put a lot of thought into it. But as far as Hartley was concerned, that one didn't take any more thought. It was like, yes, that's it.
Yeah, I remember we stayed in the basement, watched TV, like fell asleep down there. Conscious Culture Festival was coming up.
Yeah.
And you had
tried to do that.
So maybe we can just throw in a few little
Culture Festival is the festival that we met at the prior year.
And so, you know, we were both just navigating this like grief and then like telling people.
Ugh. And I have one of those too, please, babe. Yeah. Thanks.
The anticipatory grief, the complex grief of knowing this baby was gonna die. And yeah, it wasn't long after we found out that conscious was happening. We'd been looking forward to that we were like gonna go back there to the grounds where we met. And I remember
prior to finding out about Hartley, we were looking forward to it. Yes. There was that level of excitement.
I don't remember. I think it was that I didn't want to go, but then you really wanted to go. And so then you'd convinced me that it was okay. We were gonna go, and we like packed up the car. We got
almost there. 3-hour drive. Just saying.
And then something changed.
We were on the road. We were on the road that turns off the driveway that goes up to the festival site. And we were within 5 minutes of the entrance to the site, and I started feeling very socially like I started realizing that I really didn't want to talk about this over and over again. And I had this feeling that if we went and we were with all of our friends and loved ones, and that this is what we were going to be talking about and reliving this pain over and over again. And it was so fresh.
Yes. And it was hard for me because I was like, oh, I just like talked myself into this. Now you don't want
it was hard for you, but you were
both of us.
But you were cool about it. I mean, it was nice because when I did show that emotion, you showed me compassion and you were like, okay, let's turn around. You didn't give me a hard time about it at all.
I had some inner maybe hard time about it, but
I can imagine. Yeah, but you didn't make me feel bad about it. You just understood. I mean, because the whole thing was traumatic, and it was maybe one of the few times that I showed that level of emotion about it with you. Like I said, I drew those emotional curtains kind of, and maybe this is one of the first times where you felt my anxiety. It was palpable. You know?
Yeah. So then we stopped at your parents' house. I remember that.
On the way back.
Maybe even spent a night.
Maybe.
And then on the way home is when like we bought the paint, that first yellow and green paint for the bathroom. And I remember laying on the floor.
Really? That's when we bought the paint.
And you stayed up like all night painting, and I'm just like, I just wanted to be near you. I remember
I wanted to be doing something to get my mind off of all the stuff. Yeah.
You were like listening to the book on tape and whatever, and I'm just like laying on the floor near him.
So again, I hadn't learned how to be compassionate yet.
We were both grieving in the ways that we were doing the best that we could in that moment. Both of us.
We were.
As a team.
Yes. And we were being a team. Yeah. So
we chose, some bright yellow color for the bathroom.
I loved our bathroom.
Yeah, I still miss it.
I do too.
And these different greens, and we chose a green for our main living area.
Right. Oh, that's right. We got all the little swatches of greens, and I painted little foot patches on the wall. Yes.
And then we lived this strange in between existence, and I got to know Potters a bit more, which is what it's called, bilateral renal agenesis, when a person has no kidneys, which means they can't live.
Right.
And especially a baby. I mean, I guess adults have non-functioning 2 kidneys and they can have dialysis, but
do you remember how rare it is? Pretty rare.
I remember that was one of the things actually after we left the office, the doctor had given me his number, and I think that same day I called and was like, what are the chances of this happening again? And he was like, it's
like, do we even want to get
it was like, it's really rare. And and I think, was it still in his Hartley's pregnancy that I think it was that we both checked just to make sure that, because you can go through life with one kidney and never know it until something happens.
Right.
Because they don't actively like check every baby to make sure.
We checked to see if we were both. You had both kidneys. We knew because you'd just gone through that thing with your,
We made sure he also had both kidneys, which would mean that the chances of otters of having a baby without kidneys again would be really rare. Of course, it was also really rare the first time, and there's always those people.
But genetically, we checked, and it looked like everything was good to go.
She was an exception.
Yes.
So we went through this pregnancy. I think I stopped working. From what I remember, did I stop working after that until?
No.
I did keep working.
You worked all the way through Charlie's pregnancy. You didn't stop working until Charlie was born. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I had a maternity leave with Owyn.
Yes. When you say stopped working, you just mean took a break from work.
I just mean I don't remember. I don't remember the details of that. Yeah. But we took little trips, made conscious memories. I especially, when she was in my womb, I was like reading Blueberries for Sal and eating blueberries and like talking to her and just, and so we learned also about babies like this and that it's likely they might come early.
Which she did.
And it's also possible because there is either none or very little amniotic fluid, like cord compression is more common during pregnancy or at the end of, or during labor or at the end of pregnancy. I knew that it was possible she might die during labor.
I didn't know about the cord compression thing. Maybe that was something you didn't necessarily share with me, or that just didn't register when you did.
Maybe.
I do that a lot. One ear out the other.
And breech, a frank breech, so bottom down.
And, yep. I remember the booty coming out first.
And Tammy was our midwife, and she was comfortable and kind and like continued care with us in like just an incredibly loving way.
Yes.
And she was also comfortable with like attending. I still wanted to have a home birth with this baby. I still didn't want to be in the hospital.
Yes.
She agreed to, be present.
Which later on I found out, but you probably already knew how big of a deal it was for her to do that, because most midwives maybe would have asked for us to be in the hospital.
Maybe.
Yeah. Anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So she, agreed and was willing and even gifted us. We didn't end up paying her for the services in that pregnancy. She gifted that to us. And she was just
it's so hard because we were so wrapped up in the grief of the whole thing that it was hard to appreciate all the nice things that people were doing for us. She really was awesome. Anyways, go ahead.
And was comfortable with, she's of course still licensed by the state, so she did a lot of like the back workings so we didn't have to deal with it. And like
she made sure that everything we were doing was okay legally. Yeah.
It would be okay, that it was an expected death, that Hartley would expectedly die shortly after she was born, if she was born alive. So we didn't have to like call 911 or call the coroner right away.
Kind of investigation or anything like that.
Sort of those sorts of things. And I got to meet with a woman who'd had a baby with a similar condition and got to hear like her experience with birth and whatnot. I went on to any online forum I could find. There was not that much about otters
because it's pretty rare.
But there are, and I had seen that like some babies live for hours and like,
so we didn't know exactly what to expect.
We knew that we didn't know we knew the baby could die during birth and not be born live. Anyway, so we still we're just waiting for labor to begin. We and continued to plan the home birth and that Tammy would be with us, and also made it clear with her that like I didn't want to listen to heart tones or anything during labor. It's something they would normally do because it was irrelevant, and I wouldn't want to know in the middle of labor that our baby had died.
I feel like it's important to say that we mentioned that we kind of did some cool stuff. And I feel like after that, and after the initial shock wore off, that we were, I mean, other than the fact that you were still in pain from your kidney and that stint. So it wasn't like all of a sudden the kidney like made your pregnancy more comfortable. You were still like in quite a lot.
There was a stint in place with a baby on top of it.
Right.
So every time I peed, it was, yeah.
Yeah. But otherwise, I feel like we did, considering the circumstances, we were pretty amazing in the way of like trying to be as positive about the whole situation as we could. And we really did, like, it was like, well, I mean, what are some of the things we would like to do with our adult children that we're never going to get to do with this kid? And so we like genuinely like, all the way up until
aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
We went to Idaho and saw my dad.
Yep.
We went to Lake Chelan.
Yep.
Yeah.
We saw
lots of people. Yes.
But that's that's to come. That's part of the story to come. Yeah. You're still talking about how Tammy helped us through the process all the way up till
to bring in. I know the blessing away was mostly for me, but you were a part of it.
Yep, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. So in being in the birth world, maybe if you've listened to this podcast, you probably have already heard about like what is a blessing away. Are they getting to be more known rather than a baby shower, having a ceremony celebrating the mom?
Right. Yeah. It's just another kind of, exactly.
Way. It's not a bunch of like baby
ceremony. Yeah.
So my beautiful community of women, including your mother and a couple of her friends, put on, a unique blessing away ceremony, knowing that this baby wouldn't live when they were born. So we did it in the backyard. It was incredibly beautiful. They like set up this whole little like throne for me to sit on,
and we had strings that we tied up. They draped
cloth over.
So you guys were really kind of like inside of this little ceremony space. Yeah,
we were outside. I had different friends who incorporated different, like offered different things of the ceremony. Each woman like had these 2 rocks, and she wrote a word or something on it for me to have, and one for them to keep.
Yes, and they included me in like part of the beginning of the ceremony as part of the union that created Hartley in the first place.
Yes, a beautiful midwife friend, a friend who is a midwife, Jessica Weed.
Jessica.
She had purchased one of those long fabric carriers with rainbow print on it. And in like the loss community, one of the terms that some people use for the baby that comes after the baby who dies is the rainbow baby. I'm not super attached to this point. I think it's kind of weird, but anyway, so she had purchased this beautiful cloth. And so in the beginning of the ceremony, they wrapped you and me and Hartley together in this cloth, and also honoring Hartley, and then also hoping for that next living baby. Yeah. Anything else about the pregnancy before we jump to or we move into that like day before she was labor started?
I just feel like part of the time, I've kind of already mentioned a couple times now, like I really appreciated our both, because I think there are a lot of people out there who wouldn't have had the same thought process as far as like, well, shoot, I mean, what are some of the things I want to do with my kid? And of course, for me, the things that came to Ed was like, well, I'd like to drink a beer with my kid. I'd like to smoke a bowl with my kid. I'd like to maybe do the adult things, because almost everything else, I'm the kind of guy who I do that everything else with my kids anyway. We actually had a little bit of a conversation about it earlier this morning, but yeah, no, not much else. I mean, I don't think there was anything else that was like, there were no other like events that stand out in my mind, other than how cool we were about you know, because when we would talk about it with people, I think it also amazed people, like our perspective on how we were moving forward with this. Because all of my friends, they were
They would have opted
they would have opted to kill the
further.
kid.
Uh-huh.
They would have opted to have had him out of him and start fresh. And they couldn't understand. And everybody was like, "Oh, you're so strong for going through it this way." And I'm like, "We're not any stronger than any other person.
No.
We just
This
this is just the way that we decided to
for
do it."
us.
Yeah, yeah. To us, this feels, you know, I think it'd be hard and strong and like cold to have just said and started over from the beginning. But we didn't. We appreciated that the kid, she wasn't normal, but it didn't mean she wasn't alive. She was alive in there, and she was still
moving.
experiencing life that way.
Yes.
And it was like, and so yeah, so from the moment that we, not from the moment we found out, but during the interim between when the initial grief was like so at the forefront, it moved into the background, and we just were loving. You know, we were loving towards Hartley. We were dealing with the pain and the uncomfortable pregnancy. So there was a little bit of, you know, like you said, you were feeling grumpy and a lot. And so there was a lot of like me, like tipping around on eggshells.
Yeah.
And it was hard. That was hard for me. But otherwise, no, I think we were. I mean, now that I have a better understanding of the way that other people handle situations like this too, we were pretty awesome. I thought it was pretty cool.
And so I also like hadn't really done much psychedelics at that point. I still would say that I haven't done a ton of psychedelics.
Neither one of us have done a ton of them. Yeah.
But I had this little whisper about wanting to do a little bit of mushrooms before, like with Hartley still in my womb.
Yeah. Well, because otherwise, that was one of the things.
And I don't know why, but anyway, yeah.
Well, it was one of the things that we talked about being something that we would love to be able to experience with our adult children that we will never get to experience with Hartley.
I'm not sure that was that for me, but it sounds like it was for you.
It was part of my decision of because I'm like, you know, I don't necessarily, I was in this thought process of like, well, I don't want the mother of my child to be drinking while they're pregnant. I don't want them to be like doing a bunch of stuff that could harm the baby.
She's gonna die anyway. It felt very different.
Yeah, it was like, well, then why shouldn't she get the opportunity to experience this?
Like in the back of our minds, that was something I wanted to do before I gave birth to her.
Yeah, you start her.
And I feel like I might have to teach it.
Oh, okay.
And then it was getting like closer to where I was like 8 months pregnant, and like, you know, this baby could come early.
Yeah.
And so it happened to be a Friday, and we decided to ask Scotty, like, can we come out there and do this at your place in, you know, in the countryside where it's beautiful and a safe place and with parents that, you know, support our choices and whatever. And so we did do that and had a, you know, very light, I would call it a light experience.
Yeah, we didn't get. You're gonna have to wait. Kids are in the background.
Yeah, maybe we can pause in a moment. I can pee, you can help him, and then we can reconvene.
Okay.
So we do.
Not a lot.
Not
we
a
didn't
lot,
do a whole lot of much, just enough to feel it.
And it was a positive, loving experience.
We did it kind of earlier in the evening.
I think in the day. I think we did it in the day because it was like in the evening when it was like ending, and that's when we made love together.
It's like 9 o'clock when that happened.
I think so, because it was still light outside. We went outside and it was still light outside.
And we went and laid in the bed. In Sigrid's bed?
Your mom's bed? Yeah, it was still light outside because I went outside in the driveway and then we drove home that night.
Okay, yeah, I guess it was light enough for me to be able to see it. For whatever reason, my brain has it as like when you went outside to go walking, it was dark outside. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I'm with you.
Maybe we can just pause here and return to this.
Tell the rest of the story with the pause.
Where
love you to see you here in about 1 second.
That's okay. All right. So we just got to, we done a low dose of mushrooms. We were at your parents' house, and we just made love in your mom's bed. And then I started having like surges, contractions. And I remember I was like just trying to dismiss them and like not pay attention to them. And you were like, hey, babe.
At first, we were both, because you had contractions prior to this that were, those few little, I don't even know what they're called.
Practice contractions. I mean, technically, they're called Braxton Hicks because some man named them that, but
Named Braxton? Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Hicks. Mr. Hicks named the woman's thing. Anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, then continue on what you were saying about, like, at first we thought.
You were kind of like, hey, babe, I feel like these are like coming consistently now. Maybe we should like think about that.
Yeah.
And I was sort of like, I didn't want labor to happen yet. So I knew labor meant birth meant death, which was a whole other level of grief and experience.
Explain that a little bit. Because I don't think people are fully, like, just based off that small explanation, really feeling the feeling that you were feeling about that.
Oh, well, I had this anxiety of also knowing like my part in it, and that is this what you mean? Like I'm the mother, and I'm going to literally push our baby out of us where she cannot survive.
Right. So then there was this feeling of guilt.
Yeah.
That was surrounding the whole idea of like, well, shoot, I mean, like, if I push this baby out, I am actively participating in killing my baby, which is, I just want you to know that you're like almost not visible because of the angle of the camera. When you're looking at me, the back of your head is what the people are seeing. I just
thank you. I'll try to. Okay, we'll keep it before we had it covered so we couldn't see our own faces.
Yeah. But yeah, that there was this personal feeling about that you were actively participating, or that you were somehow like the one who was killing the child, even though logically that there was nothing that we could do, that anybody could do about this, that this is the way that it was happening.
Yes.
And the fact that we even knew ahead of time allowed you to feel that guilt, which
that's a question that I've gotten a lot. Like, do you wish you hadn't have done the ultrasound?
Yeah. And what's your answer?
No, I'm really glad that I did the ultrasound.
I am too.
For me, because if we hadn't done the ultrasound, I still would have had the home birth, and then we would have been actively trying to make her live and resuscitate her, do painful things to her.
Right. Once she came world side,
like, wasn't breathing, then I would have been doing all the things to try and make her live, and that I wouldn't have liked that. Whereas this, I got some time to process it before, and those moments after the birth weren't like I mean, they were sad and they were big and hard in their own way, but it wasn't like calling 911, rushing to the hospital, watching our baby be put on machines and all sorts of stuff.
I can't even imagine how that would have affected us if we'd have gone that route.
Right.
Yeah, I am also incredibly appreciative of the fact that we did find out ahead of time. It sucked, and it made the next couple of months of your pregnancy completely different.
Yes.
But I mean, it meant that when we were going into so let's finish the story of labor starting.
Labor and birth. So yes.
So that was it. So we had sex, and almost immediately after we had sex, and we were still a little high on mushrooms, like it was coming down. I don't know if any of you have ever done it before. You understand the up and the down cycle of it. And we were kind of on the down cycle of it.
And we were out at his parents' house, so we're like,
and I was telling you, like, babe, this is happening like between 2.5 and 3 minutes apart.
Yeah.
And you, or maybe it wasn't even that close. Maybe they were 5 minutes apart, but I was recognizing they were far enough apart that you didn't want to accept it. But I was recognizing that they were. It wasn't that they were close; it was that they kept happening regularly. And it was almost the same amount of time between each one of them. And it was something that she taught me about. She taught me about this beforehand. Like, so babe, when I'm this is the way that labor goes. Anyways, so you're.
So then we decided to go home.
Well, first,
what?
You were like, I don't think. No. I was like, well, what do you think? Would you want to go outside and go for a walk or something and see if we can walk these off? Because I think maybe we had gone for a walk before when you were having light contractions, and it kind of helped. So we go out, and you remember how far you got from the house?
Not very far.
So it was, I don't know, maybe 15 feet away from the front porch. And she had a really big one. She was like, oh yeah, let's. And then we made the decision to go home instead of staying there.
Because we had all of I envisioned birthing in our home and having our stuff there.
Going home, my parents live
40 minutes.
40 minutes away from our house. So going home was no small decision. It was like, okay, well, you may end up having this baby in the cars, sort of. We didn't know. I was thinking, like, for me, that was the debate. Like, do we really want to be in the car when this thing happens? But it didn't.
Little did we know.
Yeah, we got all the way home. Yeah, we got all the way home.
So we got home.
Started setting up the tub. We had a blow up hot tub.
I don't remember when you did that part.
I think it was pretty much. I think we pretty much because Tammy already had us prepared.
I didn't get in it until a day or two later.
36 hours was
it happened Monday morning when she actually was born, and this was Friday evening. Our kids are breaking down. Odin's crying and Charlot's.
I thought that the labor was like something like 30 something hours. You're talking about it being like 70 something hours. I think our timelines are we were not in our right minds.
To check our timelines here. I have it written down somewhere. So maybe it was on Sat. Well, I know that 2 nights happened and it wasn't until the next morning. But let's pause to deal with the children right now.
Okay.
Sorry, folks. It's going to be a little disjointed. Okay. Children are attended to.
They are. It's real people with a real life going on in the background.
I look back at my notes, and so I went into labor on the 29th in the evening. And we went back home, and I tried to take a bath, drank a glass of wine, like tried to slow down labor. I didn't want labor to be happening. I wasn't ready for it. I never would have been ready for it.
I remember the warm bath and the glass of wine and the low lights.
Yes, you went to sleep.
Was that prior to me setting up the tub?
I don't think you set up the tub yet.
Okay.
I mean, it was in our house.
Okay.
But
Okay.
We had everything to be able to do it.
Okay.
But
so I went to sleep.
You went to sleep. I tried to sleep. In my notes, it said I
kind of slipped in and out of
sleep.
It
was like they went to like 15 to 20 minutes apart. So I was like sleeping little bits. And then, the next day came, labored all day that day. Although I'd witnessed many women labor and give birth, I had never given birth myself.
Right.
And was like wanting labor to be slow.
Yes, I remember you actively trying to slow it down.
And I wanted to stop, but it didn't stop. But it was what it was. So I labored all that next day. You did whatever you could to support me. We made the tub. We made love again at some point.
Yeah, because I remember we used the tub a lot.
At the end, it was closer to the end.
It was a long time, a lot of labor. So
that next night, that next evening, Tammy came with Kathy. They by that time you had the birth pool set up.
Yeah.
I was in and out of the birth pool.
I was nervous about getting naked and getting in it because I got in the birth tub with you.
Yes.
But they were there, and so I was feeling self-conscious about us being naked in front of them. This is still inside of that.
I was already naked. Well, and we'd had an argument about photos like the day before, which is a whole other thing about this, which maybe we can touch on at least.
I forgot about that too, but it's something I would have changed about the way that I was with Amana, with you. What you're talking about now, the thing that you just touched on, it was something that I got very bent out of shape about.
Maybe we can just touch on it a little bit here.
Photographer,
Well, we weren't even talking about
you wanted to have the girl come and do photography, and I was like, "There's no way I'm okay with." I didn't even want the midwives to be there. Like I was having such a hard time sharing this great grief with other people.
And then for me, like for years, I've loved photography, take a bunch of photos. Like photography is like one of my hobbies.
Well, right.
And I also was like, these are the only photos. Like the belly, I took lots of belly photos. So like these are the only photos I'm gonna have. And after baby's born, like I wanted photos of this baby because
right.
Those were the only photos we were ever gonna have.
I was absolutely freaked out about the idea.
Two very different pages.
I was also really against any kind of social media at the time, about putting any of this stuff out on social media, which you were also wanting to like reach out to people and kind of connect with people. And I was like, no, 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 no. You know, this is not okay. And I think that there was the time at one of the festivals where you had some mastitis. Was that during Hartley's?
That was after Hartley.
That was after Hartley. Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to do that
right. Okay. But I mean, there was definitely some aspects about it that I was highly conservative about, and like really, really, really tried to put my foot down with the Mana, and wasn't particularly nice about it in a couple of instances, and we fought a couple times about it, and ultimately Amana acquiesced more towards the way that I wanted that aspect, the sharing aspect, to be. We didn't share much about what was going on with the outside world, including taking photos. We didn't have a photographer come in. You didn't post a whole lot online about what was going on.
I did. I mean, you opened up.
Well, you didn't share a lot of that with me.
Right.
You probably in the background were posting and whatnot. Yeah. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing because it would have just made more fights, and it's a good thing. Yeah. So, but that was like. So now we're back to where we're in the story.
That's part of the story. It is.
So that's why there was no photographer there.
So I was in the birthing tub, and
initially I think you and I both got in together, and then there was a lot of labor. I got out at a certain point.
And you were behind me. I was in the birthing tub, and you were behind me.
Then it was starting to get late. It had already been a long time at this point.
Right. It was late at night into the second night.
When did we have sex again?
Or in that day, during the day before Tammy.
So that's kind of a fun part of this story too. There was something about the way that Amana was being. Yeah, it was before Tammy, and so we had the tub ready to go before they got there, because it was sitting there.
Back to the tub, but
I love the tub. It was the coolest thing. I mean, if it hadn't been for the pregnancy thing, we talked about like, this is cool having a hot tub in the living room in front of the fireplace. This is awesome. Anyways, so it's kind of a big part of the story for me, and I'd never seen it before. I'd also never seen people do water births before.
Yeah.
I'd heard about it.
Yeah.
And
so
I want to tell the sex story.
Your side.
Tell the sex story. Okay. So before Tammy and Kathy, Kathy got there. We I don't know what Amana and I were having a good time with it. Like we were enjoying it, and she was. And at that point,
what makes the baby gets the baby out. That's like one of the things, like sensuality,
right? And so I don't. So you and so did you? Must have brought it up to me, and I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah, let's do this." And so we did, and it was, hey guys, the contractions are pretty awesome. Just saying. I thought it was pretty hot.
So you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. We enjoyed it.
Yeah. So that was fun. One of the fun things that happened during this labor. Maybe there weren't a whole lot of fun things that happened. That was definitely for me a highlight of this of this experience. Considering, okay, I'm done. That's all I needed. I needed to throw that in there.
So then, yes, we were getting tired, and I was in the point in labor where I was falling asleep between contractions, and so
me too. Yeah, I was laying.
So I was kind of like laying in bed, and I was kind of, he was on the other side of the pool, but right there with me, and we were both sort of like nodding off.
Yeah.
And then
you would like just basically kind of like turn from side to side to try to become more comfortable, but there was no
comfortable.
There was no comfortable. Yeah.
Not for me. I mean, some pain-free birds. This was not
and
one.
Tammy and Kathy just went and hung out in our bedroom.
In the bedroom.
Yeah. So we still kind of felt like we were alone.
And then I remember it felt, sort of suddenly, I felt that the fetal ejection reflex, the natural pushing that happens, that like, and the urge to push.
It's called fetal ejection reflex, huh?
Yes, again, what a horrible name, right?
It's okay. You've got a nursing background. It's cool.
So then and that's when I like called out to Tammy. I wanted her to be present for that.
I remember that. It was more of a, she says called out to Tammy, but it was in the midst of a contraction.
Of the pushing contraction.
So it was quite a guttural. You yelled out for Tammy.
Close. She comes in, and I think at that point I was just starting, if I had felt myself, I wasn't in that way. I wasn't like trying to feel myself.
You still didn't want Hartley to come out because ultimately you knew.
I know, but at that point,
it was just happening.
It was just happening.
Yeah.
So my body started pushing, and she and Kathy were out, and and it wasn't too many pushes, but so then I sort of started pushing some also with the contraction, I think, from what I remember, and her little bum started to emerge.
Yeah.
This like soft, squishy little bum.
Yeah.
And
which we couldn't, at first I thought it was a head. Because remember, she didn't have a hole.
Yeah, or a crack.
It's a unibum.
Unibum, no butt crack.
So I thought it was the crown of the head. And Tammy was like, no, this is her butt.
Yeah. Well, we'd known that she was butt down. I knew it was gonna be butt first.
Remember that. Anyways,
you knew, but you
weren't
thinking in the moment. And then when she got to a certain point, her legs flopped out and she moved, and I was like, a lot, like a little fish. I mean, her head was still inside me, but she flapped around, and I was like, Owyn, like,
touch her
feel your baby. They're alive. And so you did, and you touched Hartley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then only like this much of her was still inside of me. Tammy said that she
had a strong, when I touched her, she was moving. She was strong.
She was vigorous. So I thought, after I get her out, she's going to be, I was like, she is alive. She's going to be alive. Like when I pull her out of the water, because of how strong her movements were. But so the rest of her came out of me, and I reached down and pulled her up out of the water, and she never opened her eyes. And just had these few little kind of like gasping type of breaths, and then no breaths.
And died.
And Owyn was right there with me, and
she was alive for about 30 seconds. Between 30 seconds and 45 seconds.
Time is so elusive, it's hard to really say. They weren't timing it. Yeah, so she was alive, and then she wasn't.
Then things got weird for me after that.
And then I birthed her placenta, and
Tammy and Kathy were just amazing. They did the midwife thing, and they went around and cleaned everything up and cleaned things up for us as much as they could, put dishes away, and sort of like made the house nice for us so that we could just relax.
Do you want to tell about bringing Hartley to the bed? And
Jake? Oh, fuck.
Don't have to.
I can try to tell the story through my tears, yeah. So, I was, up until this point, I was still really trying to keep my emotions in check. And I mean, it was at this point, it was pretty easy for me to do because I've been doing it now for the last couple of months. And I had this dog named Jake, and I loved Jake. And I had a level of respect for his intuition and the way that he behaved with people. And so yeah, when we brought Hartley back to the bedroom, I remember that we set her down, kind of, and Jake jumped up on the bed with her. We set her down, and I remember that he was trying to get her to move.
Nudging.
Yeah. He could recognize that something wasn't right. Things. So yeah, that was the moment, I think, during the birth where I broke down.
Yeah.
You know, because Jake was doing what we would have done had we not known that Hartley wasn't going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So Jake was behaving the way that we would have been behaving. You know. Yeah. Yeah. So eventually we let Jake know that this wasn't going to happen. We got him off the bed. I think you and I had a difference in the way that we wanted to handle in the future.
Like I really wanted to be with Hartley's body.
I was having a hard time with the fact that we had a corpse in our house.
You were having a hard time with Hartley's body, not just a corpse.
Well, in my opinion, this is one of the differences between you were very much, this is Hartley, this is our child, and I disassociated.
Yes.
To me, it was a corpse. Well, and you had been with Hartley she was part of you for, 8 months prior, right? So, and me, this was the only time I ever really got to meet Hartley, was the little flap that she did when she came out of you. And then, I mean, it's going to sound harsh, but there was this gross factor for me, and the fact that my wife was like holding this dead body.
Yeah.
It was really hard for me. And I remember that I was really pressuring you for us to get her out of our house. And maybe I voiced it once. I remember that it was inside me. I was going, how long do we have to do this? And as the days went, I don't know how many days it was. It wasn't very many days, but it was days where I started to think that you were crazy because you didn't want to let her go.
No, I wanted to carry her around. I mean, I did at a point, was as ready as I could ever be to let her body go.
Clearly.
But
we did eventually.
But it was important to me, and I know good for me to be able to hold her, and I did take pictures of her.
You did. She did.
Even though you didn't want them taken.
I definitely didn't ever want to see them. And eventually we had one displayed in our house, it was always hard for me, and it always will be. I'm never going to be able to look at that photo and be okay with it.
No.
And it's funny because it pops up on every once in a while. It pops up on the TV, and there's a few photos of her. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize. I was under the impression that there was like the one photo. There's a few photos, but I mean, whatever. That's just. I mean, we're just different. Yeah.
Even though I knew you didn't want me to do it, but I still had to do it for me.
Yep. And I don't fault you for it. I mean, I mean, at this point in our marriage too, I have a healthier love and respect for our differences as well. So, you know, I mean, now looking back on it, I'm glad that you took the photos for you. I still don't want to see them.
Yeah.
It's hard for me anytime I'm presented with them unexpectedly.
Yeah. Well, that's understandable.
So then we
pop up like that.
So then we had Hartley, and you walking around with Hartley.
And we had a few people come to see Hartley.
Your dad came.
Your dad came.
My dad came too.
Nathan came.
Nathan came too. I blocked all that shit out because I could not believe that these people wanted to come and see a dead baby. It was so outside of what I thought was okay that I just was like, this is your shit. I'm not even going to participate in this shit. And so I don't even remember the people coming.
Yeah. So a few people came to see.
I guess I kind of remember your dad. I remember your dad crying.
Yeah.
That's what I remember about that, was him looking down and crying. Dude, it was so fucking rough.
Yeah. And then, you know, yeah, at a certain point we weren't keeping, so if you keep a body cold, it will not smell as much and will look, but the body still goes through different phases of like rigor mortis and being stiff and then being loose again. And I wasn't keeping her cold because I was carrying her around and like slept with her and things like that.
Yeah.
But eventually,
sleep in the same bed together during that period. I would not be around.
We didn't.
I didn't want to be in the same room.
You had a hard time. Yeah. We didn't sleep.
Okay, I didn't think so.
And then eventually we did call to have her body picked up. You know, if it had been allowed that we could have buried her body in your park or something, I would have done that. But that's not an option when a baby's over at the gestation. So there was a funeral home that offered free cremation, and we decided to do that.
Do you remember?
So
okay,
I want you to tell the story of
this is the moment that I feel like I went crazy.
The guy coming to pick up Hartley's body,
because we didn't understand that we couldn't. So like I was expecting that we were going to drive Hartley to the place.
At this point that we weren't allowed to.
Well, at that point when he finally came, but initially when we were talking to Tammy about what we were going to do,
be able to take her.
Yeah, I thought that I'd be able to drive them to the thing, and then when I talked to the funeral home people, they say, well, actually, legally, you're not allowed to transport a dead body. Oh fuck! I didn't even. I mean, there's so much that we would never have thought about.
No.
So right up until the guy came, I think I was kind of okay. Like I was actually kind of.
Well, you were excited for her body to be out of
the house, right? I didn't want somebody else to take her, and I already knew. I was already feeling trepidation about handing her off to a stranger.
And let's remind people that this is a tall, giant human being I'm sitting next to.
I'm 6'7", and at the time probably weighed close to 230 pounds or something like that. Yeah. So
he used to be 6'9". He shrunk a little bit.
That's a whole nother story.
Okay, so now we're like,
so the guy comes.
I still don't want it to happen, but I'm like as ready as I can be for my babies to never see my baby's body ever again.
And I remember when I answered the door, he was a little fella.
Yeah, like way littler than me.
Yeah, maybe 135 pounds of man soaking wet. And he was really sweet. He was an incredibly, I don't even remember the name, but I would give him a shout out right now if I could. Yeah. It was a funeral home in Spokane. Very nice place, very nice people. The kid who came to pick him up, they were driving a really nice van. He was dressed really well. He was treating me with a lot of respect and love. And I was not treating him with a lot of respect and love. I was not feeling any of that at all. And I don't remember if it was me who actually handed her over, or if it was you who handed her over. But one of us handed her to the guy, and I watched him take her and put her in the van and strap her down onto the little table and, close the thing and drive off. And I lost it. I was like,
for you, that was a huge thing.
Yeah. I said, I'm going to go for a drive. You can go with me, but you can't talk to me. Because all I wanted to do was scream and yell and fight. she said, okay, I want to go with you. And so we did. We went out, we rolled a couple joints, we got in the car and we went on a drive and drove. It might have been 2 hours before either one of us said a word, because I was feeling,
which is very unusual for this man.
Yeah, I can go and go and go. I can, and I just, yeah, I mean, that was me. I was kind of like, it was me really, really trying to hold it together. And it was a role reversal. It was a bit of a role reversal. That was Amana coming with me to be compassionate for me and the way I was feeling about things on that day. It felt to me like you recognized, like, it was my time. You recognized that was one of the hardest things I had to do through the whole.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, still, like, handing her off to that kid was, the fact that I had to do that versus take her myself. It felt like that one last extra slap. That one last extra legal, mental, medical slap. The fact that we couldn't take her, to me, is still, I don't understand. I mean, I think it's one of the stupid rule. And I don't understand you can't transport a dead body rule. Just so stupid. And I still, to this day, wish that I could have been the one. I mean, the same with, like, when Jake died, there's no way I could have dropped my dog off at the vet and let them take care of things from that point forward. I mean.
Yeah. So then, yeah. So now we're the stage of grief that's happening after she's birthed and dies.
Right.
And you had some time off of work. I wasn't. I had some time off of work. We decided to plan a trip. Like, I didn't want to be. We didn't want to be in our house. Didn't want to, like, to be seeing people that we knew everywhere.
Yeah.
And so we decided to take a trip down the Oregon coast
after we got her ashes back
and to the redwoods. And yeah, we were waiting until we got her ashes back. And it happened to me that my friend was also getting married a few days later, and we wound up attending that wedding.
Beach. That was in Cannon Beach,
kind of wild.
So we went down the 101, if you guys are familiar with.
So we did. So we went to pick up her ashes. These are there if you want them.
Still two.
And when we went to go pick up her ashes, right after the Norah Jones song, like Bag of Bones, came up, and it was so funny because, of course, we pick up the ashes.
I don't even remember the song you're talking about now.
I don't know what to expect with ashes, right? I've never picked up anyone's ashes, but they had it, like, in this little, like, white plastic box, and inside the plastic box was, like, a plastic bag that was, like, zip tied. Closed. This, like, clear plastic bag that was zip tied closed. It was very strange.
And if you've never seen ashes before, it's not really ashes.
It was like pieces of bone.
Yeah, little bone chunks.
And ashes.
Very white. Yeah.
So I just remember that feeling significant. And I'm like, we literally have a bag of bones right here. And, like, sort of the humor within the pain kind of moment for me.
We did find times to laugh. I mean, what do you do? I mean, it's either laugh or cry, right? Sometimes we chose to laugh.
Our road trip, we never did get pulled over. Like, we get pulled over and be like, our baby just died. Let us go.
Seriously.
I was going to use that. So we did. And it was, it was good and it was hard. Owyn painted, like, this jar to, like, take some of the ashes with us. We left some at home and took some with us. And we, attended the wedding. I'm glad that we got to be a part of their celebration. Even though it was kind of hard and weird. I was pumping at that point, pumping my milk. And on that trip, I was just dumping it into the ocean and other such places. You
still weren't ready to let go of the experience. And so you wanted to continue.
Well, it wasn't just about that. For me, it was also about, like, I've known women who couldn't make enough milk or whatever for their babies. And this felt like something that, like, I seen like so many other parts of that didn't work, right? Like her body didn't work.
Right.
And then, but to know that my milk works, so like the next kid, oh, I am going to be able to feed our next kid. For me, that
Right.
was
And there was something that like you could produce out of this whole
that I could
experience.
still produce the milk and donate it to some babies that needed
But
it.
there was still some good that came out of this. Yeah,
It wasn't all bad and negative.
Yeah. So I don't remember. I know I remember you pumping for quite a long time afterwards, actually, but I don't remember you pumping on the trip. Maybe I was just not. I don't remember it. I know you were doing it, but it's not one of those memories that sticks in my head.
Okay. So we did get to go along the ocean, and
I got to meet some of your. I didn't meet Tara then. Or is that when I met her? Yeah, that's when I met Tara and Lee, I think. Was at her wedding.
Met them at our wedding. That happened before that.
Oh, that's right. Sweet, lovely people.
Yeah.
So we met Tara and Lee there. We went there. We just happened to be able to get to participate in there.
Yeah, the timing just worked out for us to be present and watch.
And it was nice and lovely. We stayed in a little house there with one of their friends. And do you remember remember us being nervous about who we were gonna have to hang out with? I could see him in the window. He's sitting there grinding up some weed, and I was like, "Okay, we're all right. We're good to go. We don't have to worry about these peeps." So we went in and immediately hit it off with these guys and had a good time with them.
Yes, we had a good time with them, and I was definitely on an emotional roller coaster.
Right, of course.
Like crying at the drop of a hat.
Well, yeah.
That was a mess.
Yes. I was less of a mess, but yes.
And then we continued on down the Oregon coast.
Yeah, after they got married.
Found a place that we decided to
spend some of driving up on it?
Yes, and we knew we would know when we knew which place was the first place. The first place
way ahead of time
felt like the most significant.
Oh, so the whole idea was that we were going to go on this drive to potentially spread some ashes,
but we weren't committed to. We didn't have to do it,
right? And there was no particular spot we were thinking of. We were just like, if we come upon it, if we just come upon it, then we'll know.
I wasn't leaving the ashes in the car. I was bringing them into the restaurant, bringing them in everywhere.
I had just kind of got done with like that day, that drive. I feel like there was like we had like a really hard part of our one of our conversations that was sort of a fight, but kind of not a fight. And then we had just resolved it, and we came out of the woods. And there was this like bright, there was almost like the road curved, but there was this little outlet that we could go up. And at the end of the outlet was this like space between the rocks that you could see like overlooked the ocean, and like was bright and sunny right there. And we both knew that was the spot. So I didn't go around the curve. I just went up to that little cove. I call it a cove, but it was more like an outlook over the ocean. Sure. And we got out, and it was the only spot, as far as I can remember, that we spread ashes.
We sprinkled some in the redwoods.
Oh, that's right, under the tree. Under the tree.
So
I remember getting out.
Good to
you got a really awesome photo of the ashes getting blowing into the wind.
Like the wind like took them and
taking a few pieces. Yep. Because like we said, it wasn't dust. It was like there were granules, more like sand. And so her photo actually caught like the individual granules kind of going off of the cliff and off into potentially into the
dust.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Very fond memories. That was a very fond memory for me. Finding that place, doing that. That was good. That was good. Yeah.
We continued on our journey and went California, just barely.
Yeah, we went far enough into California to realize that we didn't want to go any further. Yeah, that's not as beautiful as it was in Oregon. Okay, let's turn around. Yeah, we went all the way to Eureka, Humboldt County.
And I'm grateful that we had that time away, and we continued to be on like our individual journeys with grief and how we were processing, and also like together.
Yeah.
And supporting each other the best that we could.
Right. And we're different, and Amana you're a bit more of like a ceremony person, which means that you also like
community.
Right, which means that you don't let things go the way that I do. So like for me, I think if it had just been me experiencing this, it would have been something that I would have let go for the most part. And then when it gets brought up, like what we're doing right now, then my emotions will come back because I'm remembering the thing. But otherwise, I would go on with the rest of my life as though, not as though it didn't happen, but as though it's way back in the background. Whereas you like to celebrate, and you wanted to have a photo of Hartley up, and you want, like,
I like creating my little sacred spaces and
right, these little altars around that are geared around, and like really remembering, and that, I mean, that's still something that's kind of hard for me.
Yes.
Especially when it's something to me that's wrapped around such a negative experience. I mean, there was positive stuff that came out of the experience, but overall, we would rather have it not happened.
Of course.
Yeah. And it was one of those, and in the end, we, a lot of times this came out of our mouth that, like, well, this is the kind of thing that either makes or breaks people, and we seem to be making it. I mean, it wasn't easy.
But we continued to choose one another, and
we continued to try to have children, and we were successful twice, which is awesome.
Yes. Yeah, we'll have episodes about that, but of course, grief has shifted and changed across time, and she's present in our lives, but not in the way that she was then.
Right. Yeah, it's a minor celebration on Hartley's birthday. Yeah, I think Amana's more celebrating, and I'm joining in with the celebrating.
But she comes up here and there, and
yeah. And I love you.
Is there anything else you want to say before we?
Other than I love you to death, and
not
I love you till you die, or I love you till I die.
That's like an expression, but it seems kind of like a funny.
Very poignant. Right now. I love the hell out of you, and
I love you
I'm
too.
glad that we did survive that storm.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Heart of the Soul. If you love the podcast, I would be so grateful if you would choose to subscribe, rate, review, or share the show. If you feel aligned with me and my energy and are feeling drawn to unearth your wild inner knowing, birth your baby wild and free, need support navigating the medical system, are feeling stuck in your grief, are curious about receiving an intuitive mediumship reading, or need a safe person to debrief and integrate a traumatic birth experience with, I am here for you. I have walked alongside women and mothers for over a decade, witnessing real healing, change, confidence, and stability be unearthed in them. I believe that women claiming their sovereignty, returning to their own inner knowing, and embodying their wild will truly transform the world. To learn more, book your free clarity call at www.birthingnova.love. Until next time, remember to be brave, be loved, be wild, be you, and be the change that you seek for yourself and also for the generations to come. Mwah.